Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about a recent report and research that has been published related to the rapid ice melt that has been observed in the western region of Antarctica. And in this regard, it has been observed that it is the large ice sheets that is continuously breaking apart and is continuously adding water and contributing to the rise in sea level near the western Antarctic shelf. So what is the implications of the melting? What are the research, what are the prediction of this particular research and study? We are going to discuss in this particular video. So to give you the brief context of the topic today, the rapid melting of the western Antarctic ice sheet due to the warm waters around it is now unavoidable. That is what research is trying to say, and they have clearly stated that no matter how much carbon emissions are cut, which is obviously the goal under the Paris Climate Summit, to basically cut the carbon emission to such an extent that we can limit the rise of global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius if possible by the end of the century. However, this study says that no matter how much carbon emissions we cut from now on, the rapid melting of West Antarctic's ice sheet due to warm waters is kind of unavoidable and will go on for a longer duration of time. If lost completely, the ice sheet would raise the global average sea level by almost 5.3 meter or 17.4 feet. Now, this is very significant height. To just give you a brief idea about the impact on India, if you look at the Kolkata, one of the most densely populated urban metropolitan city of India, if it is believed that if sea level rises by 6 to 7 meter, a large part of Kolkata will get permanently submerged and will become uninhabitable. And out of that, if you understand, the 5.3 meter contribution is being done only by the West Antarctic ice sheet. And if you consider the effect of the East Antarctic and also from the Arctic region collectively, then obviously it is very much possible that large part of India's coastal land, both on the west coast as well as east coast, will become submerged and uninhabitable in the near future. Also, the research says that it will have a potentially devastating consequences. Obviously, millions of people, especially the people who are living in small island countries which are surrounded by water from all the sides, whether it is in Central Pacific Island, Central Pacific Ocean such as Micronesian islands are there, Polynesian islands are there, or even in the Indian Ocean countries such as Mauritius, you have Maldives, you have Seychelles. So all these countries will have to bear the brunt of this devastating consequences, and also the people who are living in the coastal cities of the continental land masses, including India, will be obviously impacted. So basically, about the report, if we try to understand, it says that even under the best case scenario of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial level, the West Antarctica will continue to get warmer almost 3 times faster than how it was in the 20th century. And this is nothing but the impact of emission of the greenhouse gases that has been continuously on rise due to rapid industrialization and urbanization of large part of the world. And due to this, it can lead to increased melting of the region's ice sheet. The study was carried by Kathleen Norton and Paul Holland, both of whom work at the British Antarctic Survey, and Jan Reid of the Northumbria University, which is situated in UK. The study itself, the particular study that we are discussing today, is titled as Unavoidable Future Increase in the West Antarctic Ice Shelf Melting Over the 21st Century. Now, in this regard, what is an ice shelf? Let us try to understand first of all the basic terminologies. So, as you can see, an ice sheet, when you use the term, it refers to a very large area of glacial ice covering a wide spread over more than at least 50,000 square kilometers of land. And to get a rough idea of this region, we can understand that this entire ice sheet can blanket Uttarakhand state in the ice. And overall, if you look at the global scale, there are 2 major ice sheets, one in the northern hemisphere, that is the Greenland ice sheet, which we can see from the diagram here, map here, and one is obviously in the southern hemisphere, the largest ice sheet, which is the Antarctica. Together, if you talk about the Arctic, in Arctic, the Greenland ice shelf and the Antarctic ice shelf, they make up about 2/3 of all the fresh water of the earth. That means 75% of the global fresh water is locked in the ice sheets and cannot be used or consumed directly. Let us try to understand different parts of a glacier ice sheets and all on the diagram. So what we can see from here, we have discussed the definition of ice sheet. So as you can see, ice sheet is a large area of glacial mass that is covering this large land mass. Now, after ice sheets, as we move further toward the sea, we have ice shelf. After ice shelf, when ice shelf breaks apart into smaller chunks of masses, it is called as iceberg. And when iceberg further melts and breaks into lot of different ice masses, which can be ranging from few meters to which can range from few meters to few hundred meters, these are called as sea ice. And beyond sea ice, we have the sea level. A snow line is something that is the line below, above, what we can say, before which ice is permanently in the frozen state, because temperature always remains below 0 degree Celsius. Now, obviously, when ice sheets start to gain more and more mass, they become more and more heavier. They contribute to a fall in the global mean sea level. Because if the ice sheets are rising, that means the water is converting from liquid stage to the solid stage. That means water is being pulled away from the liquid stage in the ocean and is being continuously deposited in the form of solid mass. However, when the loose mass, that means what is happening is the ice is converting into liquid, and thus it will contribute to the rise in global mean sea level, which is our current problem. Now, if you look again here, there are various processes through which ice sheets melt, and specifically if you focus on the melting of ice sheets in the West Antarctic region, what we can see is that the region behind the warming of this West Antarctic ice sheets or melting is believed to be that warm ocean water is contributing to this melt. And the edges of an ice sheet which is floating on the oceans, again if you look at here, we have the ice sheet, we have ice shelf, we have iceberg. So when the edge of the ice sheet, that we can call as ice shelf, it comes into contact with the warm oceanic water, obviously this will contribute to its melting. And ice shelf stabilize the land-based glacier just behind them, as you can see from the picture. That means, suppose if this ice shelf itself become unstable, start to melt rapidly, what will happen? Ice sheets will come directly in contact with the warm water, or if they start to break, if the ice sheet shelf start to break, what will happen? Ice sheets will also start to flow at a more faster rate toward this oceanic water. Thus, if an ice shelf thins or disappears, these glaciers tend to speed up, discharging more ice into the ocean and causing rapid rising of the sea level. That's what we can say in one way, that both ice shelf and ice sheets are different from the sea ice. Also, there is one other small area that you can see from here. This represents the sea ice. Sea ice is basically the free floating ice that surrounds the polar region, and it is created by the freezing of the sea water. So that is the difference between four different terms that we can see: sea ice, iceberg, ice shelf, ice sheet, and then we have a snow line, and this direction is representation of the flow of the glaciers and ice sheets. So as we have discussed, it is largely the coming in contact of the ice sheets or glacier with the warm oceanic water that causes the melting. The same process is taking place in the West Antarctica as well, particularly in the Amundsen Sea region of the West Antarctica, which is the focus of Norton's study. Norton is a scientist who is who has contributed to this particular study. And for decades, the region's ice shelves have been depleting. Glaciers have been flowing faster toward the ocean. The ice sheet has been shrinking, and this is something that has been captured beautifully on this graph, as we can see. For example, if you compare the year 2005 and till 2023, what we are seeing is the ice mass variations since 2002 even has been continuously in the negative phase. That means Antarctic region, especially the West Antarctic itself, is continuously losing its ice, as seen in this particular picture. For example, earlier the mass of Antarctic mass, if suppose at 2002 is 0, so in last 20 years this mass has reduced by almost 2,500 gigaton. So that is the significant impact which we are also seeing in the rise of the sea level. However, if we focus on the major findings of this particular studies, they have, first of all, if we try to understand how the study has been conducted. So the researchers have used the model to run many different simulations. That is the general practice of the 21st century, totaling over 4,000 years of ocean warming and ice shelf melting in the Amundsen Sea. And researchers have said that they have contributed several factors. The two most important of them are the different trajectory for fossil fuel burning. That means various scenarios have been taken into account. That is, considering the best possible scenario where we are able to limit the global rise of atmospheric temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, to worst case scenario where there is uncontrolled burning and release of greenhouse gases such as CO2 and methane specifically. Second factor they have taken into consideration is the influence of natural variations in the climate that is happening in a kind of periodic manner, or we can say in cyclical manner. The best example is the events such as El Nino, La Nina, their timing, their duration, and thus based on all these factors and putting this factor into simulations, they have said they have actually used a high resolution computer model of the Amundsen Sea to provide the most comprehensive assessment of the warming in West Antarctic to date. And if you come finally to the findings, obviously, as we have discussed initially also, the findings are very, very grim, because all scenarios in this simulation model show significant and widespread future warming of the Amundsen Sea and increased ice shelves melting, largely due to instability of the ice break, largely due to instability in the what you can say, the outer part of the ice cells. Moreover, there is little to no difference between the scenarios up to 2045. What it basically means that no matter how much control we put right now, up to 2045, there will be no difference, no difference of the effect that we can take to counter the climate change and to basically control the rise, this release of the greenhouse gases. Ocean warming and ice shelf melting in the 1.5 degrees Celsius scenario is statistically the same as it is in the mid-range scenario, which is closer to what existing places to reduce fossil fuel use over the coming decades would produce. And this is a very, very worrisome scenario. However, many scientists believe that climate change or climate change phenomena is not restricted to any one factor or any one geographical area. So we should not be so much disappointed by these findings. However, if you look at the impact that this kind of in this kind of climatic changes can have on India, so we can clearly see India is a country with a very huge coastal landmass, almost extending for 7,000 kilometers and more. So an increased sea level rise will obviously affect the coastal communities across the world, including India as well. And since India has a long coastline, a dense population, therefore it is also very, very vulnerable to any kind of sea level rise. And if coastal communities cannot afford to defend against the rising seas, obviously, for example, by building walls, the people would have to move elsewhere or become refugees, or more precisely, climate refugees. So this is something that India also need to take into account in its future planning, specifically when it is formulating climate change policies or representing itself in the global forums that is related to climate, related to fight against the climate change. Overall, after all this discussion, what we can say in conclusion is that obviously the findings are very grim, findings are very weak, specifically related to the West Antarctic shelf. They shouldn't discourage the efforts to mitigate the impacts of climate change that also the study has highlighted. And the melting of the West Antarctic ice sheet is just one contributor, as I said earlier, to the sea level rise, which is just one impact of the climate change. And if we have reached the point, obviously, because if you try to understand, industrial revolution began somewhere in the middle of 18th century. So since then, almost 300 years has passed, and in 300 years we have done a lot of development in the economic sense, but at the same time we also have caused what we can say unrecoverable damage to the environment and the climate around us. Thus, we have reached that point where some impacts of climate change can no longer be avoided, and obviously substantial ice losses in West Antarctica is probably one of them. However, climate change, as we have discussed, is not all or nothing. It does not depend on a single factor that either you can do something or you cannot do anything. It is not true. So there are many other impacts which we can still avoid or try to limit. For example, the loss of East Antarctic ice sheets, that is still something that we can work on, or the severity of the heat waves that India also has started to face very frequently every year, droughts, as well as extreme rainfall that is causing flood-like situation in the different parts of the world, including India. The most recent example is of the flood that happened in the Sikkim state due to the Glacier lake outwards. So that is overall about the results of the finding regarding the West Antarctic ice shelf and its melting. That is all for this video. Thank you very much.